接下来我们请同样是国际战略中心的秘书长黄真英女士。黄女士也是针对这个特朗普的军事战略与朝鲜半岛战争危机之间的关系，跟我们分享。请黄女士。
Hi everyone. First of all, I'd like to express my deep gratitude to the organizer of Global South Academic Forum for inviting the International Strategy Center. It is a great opportunity to learn and exchange, and I hope our presentation contribute this learning and exchanging opportunity. So I will talk about what the Trump's military strategy is and how it escalates the war crisis on the Korean Peninsula. So the U.S. military strategy is typically set out in the National Defense Strategy. This document presents the overall directions of defense operations, assesses threats facing the U.S., and outlines strategic priorities, defense budgets, and allocations, and deployment of the U.S. military forces. Although the final version of this document has not yet been released, its direction can be discerned from the content of the draft leaked in early September. The draft appears to center on a policy focus of homeland defense. Indeed, Trump is pursuing a hardline policy toward what it defines as internal enemies. It has categorized illegal immigrants, leftists and progressives, and drug cartel as internal threats. Notably, in early October, Trump summoned generals from the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps and declared that internal enemy must be eradicated. And then Trump has either deployed or announced a plan to deploy troops to at least 10 cities under the pretext of policing and immigrant enforcement. However, given that the MAGA camp is dominated by China hawks, it is expected that the hegemonic logic demanding victory in greater power competition will remain central to the formulation of Trump's second-term defense strategy. While the Trump administration continues to define China as a primary threat and maintain a confrontational stance, it places renewed emphasis on security within the Western Hemisphere. Centered on the American continent, this plan aims to reduce expenditure on security commitments in Asia and Europe, pressuring allies to shoulder the resulting burden while cutting U.S. defense spending in a hallmark with Trump's approach. This orientation is evident in the interim National Defense Strategic Guidance released in late April. According to this guidance, containing China's expanding influence is defined as a core national security interest, while the U.S. prioritizes preventing a Chinese invasion of Taiwan and defending the homeland. The guidance also calls on Europe, Asian, and Middle Eastern allies to increase their defense budgets to actively counter regional threats such as Russia, North Korea, and Iran. Consequently, at the NATO summit in The Hague this June, member states agreed to raise their collective defense spending to 5% of their combined GDP by 2035. South Korea is no exception to this trend. South Korea remains a crucial U.S. ally, but cannot escape Trump's demand that allies increase defense spending and cost sharing. Following the inauguration of the Lee administration, the first South Korea-U.S. summit took place on August 25th, during which President Lee partially accepted Trump's request for greater defense spending. Immediately after the summit, President Lee stated at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C., saying, South Korea will play a more proactive role in safeguarding the security of the Korean Peninsula, and adding, we will increase our defense budget. Furthermore, during the summit, Trump pressed for greater purchase of U.S. weaponry declaring South Korea as a major buyer of our military equipment. The South Korean government has responded favorably, explaining that purchasing U.S. weapons is intended to acquire essential, advanced, or critical equipment. Confronted with Trump's tariff war, the South Korean government has sought by any means to reach an outcome acceptable to Washington. Regarding the $350 billion investment, the Lee administration proactively negotiated with the U.S. to invest approximately $20 billion annually over a decade. Such large-scale overseas investment risk potentially triggering an economic crisis. Similarly, the government's approach to defense cooperation with the U.S. also seems aimed at pleasing Washington. Yet this direction could yield consequences far graver than an economic downturn. Strategic flexibility effectively allows the U.S. and the South Korea forces to be mobilized for operations serving U.S. global security interests, turning South Korea into an outpost. This creates a real danger that Korean Peninsula could become the first target if U.S. conflicts escalate into war. Furthermore, increased defense cost sharing and spending not only deepen an economic strain, but also accelerate the militarization of the Korean Peninsula. Expanding the defense budget and arms purchases in the name of peace through strength merely heightens the regional military tensions and does nothing to advance peace. Such escalation represents a war crisis even more severe than an economic one. Trump seems indifferent to whether economic crises devastate his own citizens, U.S. allies, or other nations, and equally unconcerned about lives lost in military conflict or military tension, so long as such outcomes serve his interests. Similarly, under the guise of pragmatism, the Lee administration congratulates itself on diplomatic success while aggravating both economic and war crisis. In this context, overcoming the crisis and pursuing peace along a path independent of U.S. interests is our collective responsibility. In the U.S., protesters opposing Trump's policy declared, "The people are the master of the U.S. There is no king." By mid-October, demonstration had spread to over 2,700 locations across all 50 states. In South Korea as well, like Taehan explained on October 29th, during Trump's visit to South Korea, social movements and progressive political parties organized the International People's Actions Against Trump. Now, it is the time for people around the world to unite in solidarity against Trump to overcome the war crisis in Northeast Asia. Thank you.
谢谢黄秘书长黄秘书长给我们指出了特朗普军事战略的实质，目的是为了维持他的霸权，但是他却要求所谓的盟友来支付这些代价。韩国面对着特朗普的这样的作为，有可能会陷入经济危机，甚至更危险的战争的危机。这是我们要共同面对警惕的情况。